I've known Teslima here for a long time. First time I encountered her was in Decatur, Illinois, when she came to the same contest, the World Championship Old-Time Piano Playing. Was that 1992? Long time ago. Yeah, okay. And she came and confused a lot of people, sat down and played the Maple Leaf Rag in the style of Jelly Roll Morton, and they were scratching their heads because many of them had not been exposed to it. So she exposed them to it, and now we all do it. It's great. So she's advanced in that way. Hails from the Detroit area where she teaches music in the schools. So she is going to talk to us this morning about the legacy. Hopefully more people will come in. Please enjoy this. At some point, we believe it will be online. Some of the last 2 years have been. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Teslima Bey.
Hi, good morning. How are you? So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I got exposed to ragtime when I was playing clarinet in my high school marching band, and we played The Entertainer, and I was like, what? And so I went and got the piano music, and it took me about 20 years to learn, The Entertainer, but it was just such a happy music. And it also sounded like the music, it sounded like home to me. And for a long time, I wanted to figure out, why does it sound like home? Well, I stayed with my grandmother when I was like 4 and 5 for a couple of years. And my grandmother, when she came to Detroit, she used to sneak out in the middle of the day while her husband was at work, don't tell anybody, and go to the theater, the Copeland Theater, where she saw Fats Waller, Bessie Smith, Butterbeans and Susie. And those were my lullabies. When she would, at night, she would sing, excuse me, miss, answer me this, who could your good man be? And she would do all the parts, none of your business. And so that's what I grew up on, and that's what ragtime sounds like to me. And so when I got to college, I was so interested, and excited about learning about American composers, and there was no mention of ragtime, and so I'm already like an oddball person, so I really felt like an oddball there. But the music is just so powerful that I just kept pursuing it. I went to the Azalea Hackley collection at Detroit Public Library, and it was this big room full of music. So for me, it was like being a kid in a candy store. I'm just there every day, copying music, looking through music, and formed a band, a big ragtime band, and I got introduced to Charlie Gabriel, who's from New Orleans, and he plays with the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. And what he says, Teslima, you gotta take it off the paper and put it in your heart and play it. So I had to learn how to play it in a whole different style than it was written in. And so now what you're going to hear this weekend from me is like a kind of mixture of classic and New Orleans and whatever I can do on the piano. But that's how I started playing ragtime. That's what I've been doing with ragtime. I have a ragtime trio. We play at Preservation Hall maybe every other year. And I'm going to be fortunate enough to be able to put together a ragtime big band again this year to perform in Detroit at the Concert of Colors. So why you're here is to hear me talk and lecture, which is what I do at school. And this is a PowerPoint that I put together for some students at University of Michigan College, talking about the legacy of ragtime. So you probably know more about it than I do, but anyway, here's some stuff. It was 1900, probably 1890 to 1920. Some of the composers are Scott Joplin, Tom Turpin, Harry P. Guy, Artie Matthews. These are like my favorite guys. Jelly Roll Morton, James B. Johnson, and actually Eubie Blake. and there's a historical context that I want to talk about. So, ragtime is American music. It's uniquely American. I call it the first global music. Around that time, you had people coming in to America, unprecedented, from all over the country, all over the world. And as people do, they met with music. They met through music. And, you know, they had jam sessions just like we do now. And they mixed all those styles together. So you had the marching band style, you had calypso, you had the South American, Mexican feel, and you put all that stuff together with blues, and that's what you got. You got ragtime. And I think it was because of all of that immigration, all of these people coming from all over the world and doing something together, that we were able to come up with this beautiful music that is known throughout the world. The other thing is the energy. I thought about that. That was the industrial age. That's when all of the cars and factories and everybody was moving really, really fast. We went from horses to cars, you know, so things, and just like we're going from cars to computers. But things started moving really, really fast, and I think that's the energy of ragtime. Here are some pictures of my favorite guys. Tom Turpin is a particular favorite of mine. He's from St. Louis. He was 300 pounds, over 6 feet, and he had to have his piano put on blocks so he can play it standing up. And he had a club called the Maple Leaf Club. He was also a constable, deputy constable. He was a pretty big man in St. Louis, but the thing I like about his club is that that's where the musicians came to strut their stuff, to play piano and to check each other out and to learn new stuff. The main thing I like about him that I read was this big guy, over 6 feet tall, 300 pounds, who ran a jazz, you know, who ran a club where people came to drink, you know, it's kind of rowdy. He never hit anybody in anger. And to me, that was just like an amazing and wonderful thing. My uncles were all big men, and they were all, we called them gentle giants. And that, to me, to have a heart of gold like that is why I like Tom Turpin. And of course, Scott Joplin. And I don't know if you want to read all of this stuff, but Scott, you know probably that he was born around Texarkana, Texas. They say he was born around Linden, Texas. He spent a lot of time in Sedalia. This is a house where he took his wife to live in. He got syphilis. He was in New York. He wasn't that great of a piano player, a musician, you know, technical-wise. He was an excellent composer. He didn't consider himself a great pianist, you know, technically. But one thing, he did not want to be considered a red light district. You know, ragtime was kind of confined to red light districts. In other words, not at a concert hall. This was not concert hall music. So in order to play it, if you had a passion for it, you had to go into like a bar where people drank and, you know, all kind of stuff was going on that you may not have been interested in. And a couple of the composers, Scott Joplin and Artie Matthews, just were not into that scene at all. But that's where they had to go if they wanted to practice, they wanted to play their music, if they wanted to practice their art. So when Scott Joplin got to New York, he was trying to get his opera, Tremonisha, published and get somebody to perform it. And that's how he spent the last years of his life, going and knocking on doors and having the doors closed and saying no. People said, no, we're not going to do this. You're not going to publish. No, opera from you, Scott Joplin? No. So he got really ill. Syphilis took over his body. He died on April 1st, on April Fool's Day in 1917. And when I read that, that's when I decided that I wanted to start doing this stuff publicly, because I wanted to honor him and let him know the influence that he had on the world of music. And to honor his music, Maple Leaf Rag, that music to me is like the foundation. I tell my kids this all the time, of Bruno Mars, Prince, Jackson 5, all of those, these modern players now, these modern musicians now. Like my mother would say, if it wasn't no Scott Joplin, wouldn't be no Bruno Mars. You know, this is where it all comes from. Harry P. Guy was born in Ohio, and he's actually buried in Detroit, where I'm from. And I was actually fortunate enough to be part of the people who buried him. Through my mentor, Charlie Gabriel, they had a good old-fashioned New Orleans funeral where they were in the gravesite. We had to like raise money to get a headstone, and he's buried in Elmwood Cemetery. But we had a good old-fashioned New Orleans funeral. We marched in the cemetery, and then we went to a bar and we partied all night long. And that's where I met Nan Bostic. And so we had a good time with his music. Some of the songs that I played from him, I Cleaning Up in Georgia, and the other one I can't think of right now, but I think it's Walking. I can't think of it right now, too early. So, this is Artie Matthews. This is one of those composers who hung out at the Maple Leaf Club and just decided, you know what, I'm done. This is not my scene, I don't want to be here. He moved to Ohio, and with his wife, he opened up a school for musicians and to teach etiquette. And one of his students was Frank Foster, who wrote for Duke Ellington. And a funny fact about Artie Matthews was his son, Dr. Artie Matthews, taught in the schools in New England, and he taught at Amherst College, which is where my son went to college at. So when I found that out, I was like, oh yeah, we're connected, sort of, a little bit. And this guy, Jelly Roll Morton, is, to me, he was the bridge between ragtime and jazz. And he was from a city in New Orleans where you had to be really good at what you did to stand out. And so he talked a lot about how good he was. The thing is, he really was good. He was really, really good. I play a couple of his songs, and they're very, very hard. In New Orleans, they passed a law that if you had just like this much black blood in you, you could not own property. He owned property. His family owned property. When they passed the law, they lost their house. They lost all their property. So they went from being middle class to being poor. So Jelly Roll was like 13. He decided he was going to help the family out, and he went and started playing in the red light district, and he made lots of money because he was very good. And when his grandmother found out that that's how he was bringing money into the household, she kicked him out. And at 13. So I'm sure that had a profound effect on him. He did not stop playing music. He moved up to Chicago, and he became involved with publishing music. And he was a pretty big man because the people that were coming up from New Orleans to Chicago would go see Jelly Roll Morton, and he would hook them up, you know, get their music published, get them a job. But then he started losing money because the mob got involved with his publishing company, and they stopped paying him. So here we go again with this guy who spends the last years of his life trying to get recognition. He moved from Chicago to New York. He kept suing, trying to get the rights to his own music. He sued forever. And he kept telling everybody he could, I lost money. I lost $3 million. I would have $3 million if they hadn't stolen this from me. I don't know how much was stolen from him. I can imagine that some of his songs were stolen. I know he wrote Wolverine blues while he was in Detroit. And by the time he got home to Chicago, it had been published with a different composer. So, you know, this kind of thing happens, and it still happens today. You know, it's nothing new. But he he kind of was a ladies' man. He was in Washington, I think it's Washington, and he was playing at this club, and he got into an argument with a rowdy person. This is why people didn't like playing in those clubs. A rowdy person came in, and he got in a knife fight, and he never really recovered from that. He was very suave. He did, when they were looking for recordings, he went to the Library of Congress and said, you know, you ought to record me, because I'm like the one who invented jazz, right? And those recordings are my treasure. I love to hear his voice. He has like this deep, deep voice, and the guy kind of gave him a couple of drinks, you know, and encouraged him to talk about the seedier side of the music. So he talks about how he used to go and people would get shot in New Orleans, and he would see all the place where you get the morgue. The morgue would be full on Sunday morning, you know, that kind of thing. I don't know if he embellished it, you know, but it was kind of rough where he came up from. So he went to California. He passed through California several times. He fell in love with a woman named Anita. He had a couple of wives and girlfriends, but I think Anita kind of got to his heart because he wrote a song called Mama Anita, and that's where he died. He died in Los Angeles, and she was the executor of his estate. This is a lot of stuff on here. This is one of the places where he stayed. This is Storyville. And this is James P. Johnson. James P. Johnson taught Fats Waller. And when I was studying about James P. Johnson and Fats Waller, I found that they all studied Bach inventions. They all studied Bach. So now Bach is like my favorite guy. That's who I want my point. It's like, this is how they get that dexterity. And of course, Eubie Blake. I heard Eubie Blake playing Maple Leaf Rag, and I got like this much of it that I'm going to try to do, but what he did, he put a boogie at the bottom of Maple Leaf Rag and started playing it, and I was like, oh my God, it is so beautiful. So I'm going to try to do that this weekend. Hopefully it'll work. And this is the end of my presentation. I kind of went through the reading because I don't know if you want to read all this stuff. That was for a college crowd. But when I was in college, around 1976, and I'm probably telling my age, but that's okay. My music history professor told me the reason we didn't study African American composers was because African Americans couldn't write words, we couldn't read, let alone write music. And I've just been reading about Scott Joplin's life in Sedalia. Thank you, Sedalia, because apparently they could, because he went to college here, and there was a thriving African American community here. But that started me on the road to the Azalea Hackley collection and to discover all of this beautiful music. And one thing I discovered about ragtime was that it was our music. It's American music. It's not a black music. It's not a white music. It's an American music, and it's beyond color. And I think because, in a kind of backdoor way, because my teacher told me that, I went on to discover the truth. And I didn't find out that, it was just black music that everybody, we own. I found out that this is an American. This is what we can do when we come together as people. And that has made me so strong. And that is something that I teach my children. So in a way, thank you, Dr. Young. And thank you so much. That's going to end my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed being here and talking about myself.
Can we ask some questions?
Thank you. Oh, questions?
I want to start with social issues, and one of the things we think about here in Sedalia is there are so few African-American performers of this music. And I've talked with Reginald Robinson about that. Could you address that?
Yes, it's the same, except for in New Orleans, of course. But in Detroit, a lot of the, until they hear me play, a lot of African Americans are not, they don't really like ragtime because they don't know it. They think of it as minstrel music. So what happened around that time of ragtime, some people wrote some music that they said was ragtime. They were in New York, and I looked at some of that music, and you know, but on the covers, they put like these really racist, really ugly pictures of black people, which became associated with ragtime. But if you go into the research and you discover people like Scott Joplin and Jelly Roll Morton and Artie Matthews, you see how far away from that. These guys were like genius composers. These were like some heavy guys. They had nothing to do with the ignorance that you saw on the covers of the Tin Pan Alley ragtime pieces, or quote-unquote ragtime pieces. And I think a lot of black people do not want to be associated with that racist era. You know, my job as a black person is to take our history and take it away from Tin Pan Alley. And it's such a rich history. It's so beautiful. If only when I was in high school, if only somebody had told me about Scott Joplin, what a difference it would have made to me in my life. And so when I play it, like I play at the clubs in Detroit, and it's like these jazz clubs, and they're like, you play what, ragtime? But when I start playing it, they're like, oh, wow, I like that. Then they see where it comes from and what it's about. We just need to educate, I think, each other. And I also think we need to stop fighting. Because if we just sat down and talked, we would find out how much we have in common, and we could find out the real music. I think that we have a lot that we have more in common than we have against each other. So hopefully that's what we can do. Question?
No.
Yes,
Tell
ma'am.
me, in Sedalia at the turn of the century, Sedalia's black community was very intent upon being seen as respectable.
Yes.
And ragtime was not considered respectable.
Right.
And that notion extended even into the 1960s, when the ragtime festivals began to be held, and there was kind of a resurgence of interest in ragtime in Sedalia. The black community still continued to divorce itself from it.
That's what I was saying when I was saying with this ragtime, like Scott Joplin, Artie Matthews, you could only play ragtime if you went to the brothel or to the club. You couldn't play it in a church. You couldn't play it in a concert hall. And so once again, it became associated not only with these weird pictures of people with mouths like out to here, but it also became associated with drinking and sin and wild things. Now, I'm not saying that there were not some musicians who were a little wild. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that these were serious composers, and their music, to me, did not belong in a bar. It belonged in a concert hall, and that's why I'm so grateful to Sedalia for bringing it to the fore. And look, I'm in a concert hall now talking about ragtime.
Okay, now, go ahead.
Yeah, wouldn't you say that a lot of the ragtime was performed at home?
Perform where?
Performed in people's houses?
Oh yeah, and so the piano. Yeah.
Because that's where it really became popular.
And my brother always told me that's how the pianos became so popular, the Steinway and all of them. I think a lady up here had a question.
Sort of along those same lines, piano generally is taught either privately, or I mean, it's not generally an instrument that's taught in the public schools or that kind of thing. how do your students, not just to hear it, but how would you get
Get them in.
encourage, get them playing?
Play it.
Is there, to expand the number of folks who actually want to play ragtime?
This is, I play it. And it's my joy. I've met a couple of people, a couple of students who've heard me play, who have gone on to like New Orleans, and now they're like these really good musicians, you know. But what I do is just play it. Even for my little babies. I taught high school and I taught middle school, and now I'm teaching little baby elementary students. But I will find a way to put it in my lesson plan. I will be talking about musicians. I could be talking about, even with the choir, you know, I'll talk about, well, I want you guys to mesh together. Now, listen to this. Let me play this for you. Then, oh, Miss Hall, what's that? What is that? And I'll say, well, that's Maple Leaf Rag, and that was written by Scott Joplin. Who's Scott Joplin? And then that's my doorway. And I'm in it. And then I'm in it. You should never have asked that question. Yes, sir.
Over a number of years, I've done a lot of studying on all these pianists, composers, and I noticed how much influence J.S. Bach had on them.
Oh, yes.
Incredible. Fats Waller said he was the greatest composer ever lived.
Yes.
James P. Johnson studied Bach fingering and this thing, and also Scott Joplin, you know,
Yes.
years also studied the Bach fingering. And all through these pianists were studying Bach. So Bach is really an incredible foundation to all this. And this is not well known. If that kind of thing was also taught, people would have more respect for ragtime as sort of America's classical music, more or less. You know?
I believe it is America's classical music, and that when you said that about Bach, and when I was reading the histories of everybody, because I was trying to figure out, well, how did they learn how to play like they did? Who did they study? You know, and Bach was the common denominator. Bach. Bach is just such an excellent composer. When I teach school is really messy. You know, things happen that you have no control over. Your day is like, when I get home, I pull out a Bach invention and play it, and he goes all over the place, but then he brings it back so nice and neatly. And that's how I de-stress from teaching in the daytime, is to play Bach. To me, he's just a genius composer, and I can understand why so many people study him, including me.
I know one of the things you've studied is obviously Detroit music history. Can we hear more about Harry Guy and Fred Stone? I understand they had a union that was so strong in that town that by the 1910s, white guys were trying to break into it just so they could work.
You know more about it than I do.
But I mean, more about Harry Guy.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of you remember Nan Bostic. She's, my God, I met her at the Harry P. Guy ceremony, and she kind of embraced me and helped me along a lot. But is it her uncle?
Charles Davis.
Yeah, her uncle owned a music store in Detroit. Now, I don't know about the union, but Detroit was like sort of a mecca for music around 1910, 1920. That's where everybody wanted to come play. As a matter of fact, Jelly Roll played there. When I told you about my grandmother and the Copeland Theater, there was a circuit of black musicians, and they traveled the same. When they went on tour, they went to the same places, and this is one of the places they went to. And she heard Fats Waller, Bessie Smith, Butter Beans and Susie, the McKinneys, a family who is still very strong musicians. They had the McKinney Cotton Pickers Orchestra, and they were excellent and kind of ruled around in Detroit. There were several big bands that played at the Paradise Theater, which is now our orchestra hall. Now it's the Maxim Fisher Theater, and it's where our symphony is housed at, and it's where we have a lot of concerts there. I was fortunate enough to have a concert of my own there, right before it became the Max and Fisher, right after it got renovated. And it's just an excellent place to have a concert. I don't know if I answered your question,
Well,
but I
also-
talked about some stuff.
And Fred Stone was another major figure. Anyone else?
Not that I can think of now.
And do you know if there was a ragtime scene across the river in Windsor?
I'm sure there was. But I never went. There's a museum, because you know Canada was where the slaves escaped to get away from slavery, and there's a museum in Canada that celebrates Juneteenth, and I play there a couple of times, and there's a thriving black community right there, and I can't think of the name of it, but it's right across the river. On the tip of my tongue, but I'm not going to think of it right now. No, outside of Windsor. Yeah, just outside of Windsor.
So, trying to look at the future, I'm going to be discussing that tomorrow, how we keep this alive. We also need to engage, as you said, we need peace, we need to stop fighting, have all these communities together, but how do you engage and reconcile parts of the history?
You're gonna hear some of the stuff I do, which is a little bit radical, because I mix all the genres of music into one ragtime piece, because to me, music is not stationary. One of the differences between like a classical, like Mozart piece, and a ragtime piece is that ragtime, to me, in my humble opinion, is a living music. There's a section of ragtime in each piece where you improvise. That's the jazz part, you know, where you make up stuff. And when people were actually playing the music back in 1910 and 1920, they would make up stuff. During, you know, they would give you the head, what we, in jazz music we call it the head or the melody, and then they would play the chorus and they would make up stuff. So when I'm playing music, we always have a section where people improvise. And what we're doing now in Detroit is every once in a while I'll have a youngster come and play with us, and they love it. The musicians, these young musicians in Detroit now are so good, but they have a lot of respect for the ragtime music. So when I call them up to play for me, I'm so blessed and lucky, because they're all like, sure, we'll come. And that's how I introduce it to them. And then when I hear them play, I hear parts of it in their music, and I'm just amazed. I'm amazed that they like it, and I'm amazed that they incorporate it into their own sound. As far as the social and political aspect of it, I think we have to stop being afraid of history. We have an ugly history. People do wrong things. People do bad things. But because someone does something bad, doesn't mean that they can't be good. You know, that's what forgiveness is all about. And if I was judged on all the bad stuff I did, I would probably never get into heaven. So I myself am asking for forgiveness. And I think we need to stop holding grudges. My children, I teach children of all different races, all different colors. And one of the things is that you don't carry a grudge with you all the time. You don't forget it. You don't forget it. But you don't let it control you know? Because your father owned my father doesn't mean that we can't sit down and have a cup of coffee, you know? And I'll tell you one more story, and it's about me, and it's about racism. But when I was in school, I had a job, and my boss was the president of the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, which is like this really, it's not racist anymore, but it was like this all-white really racist thing. And he said something to me that was, you know, I thought was demeaning. And so I went in his office, I sat down, I was like, look, you're racist, I'm racist, you need a secretary, I need a job, let's just get past it so we can do what we have to do. We became the best of friends. He was one of my best employers because we were, first of all, and this is what I believe, because we were honest with each other and because we had a common need. He needed a secretary, I needed a job, let's go, you know, let's do it. I don't think we should give racism as much power as people give it today, you know. I don't really think it's a real thing. We shouldn't, it has weight because we give it weight, you know. One thing my mother told me that was very, that kind of took the onus off. One of my teachers said something really bad to me when I was a little child, and I was like, Mom, why did she say that? And Mama said, some people think because their eyes are blue and yours are brown, they're good and you're bad. And she said, isn't that silly? And as a child, I was like, yeah, that's really silly. You know, how is your eye color gonna, you know, determine who you are? But that allowed me to place racism in like a really silly thing so it didn't have as much power over me. I think that was the best thing my mother did for me. You know, and I think she told me that her father told her that. So by not having grudges, by not holding on to the past to where you let it control who you are, I think we can get past it. I know we can. I know we can. The fact that I'm here standing in front of you and I'm filled with love for you and I'm looking in the audience and I see smiles from you, I know we can. We can do this. Thank you.